liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Monday, October 16th, 2023. Time to get going again. One more week to go before, nothing's happening that's different this week. Although college boy number 2 gets to come home for a short period of time, so that's good news. Yeah, unless, of course, he's carrying some infectious disease that knocks us all for a loop, as is the case with about 75% of college campuses, it turns out. So, I don't know. Get vaxxed up, get your flu shots, be careful, wash your hands out there, etc. Always the same advice, although now you're not allowed to say it because people will shake their fist at you and say, you're violating my HIPAA rights, or HIPPO, or however they choose to spell it. They usually misspell the HIPAA thing. Anyway, one of many problems arising this morning, and I'll just, we'll survey all of them on our way around the news today with Greg Dworkin and, of course, Justice Putnam hinting to us as we get the show ready to roll what's on his mind, and we'll see whether these things overlap. Let's see. Yes, okay. Certainly, former guy Donald Trump faces the imposition of a gag order this time, and he'll maybe actually do it in Judge Chutkan's case up in, that's the New York case, isn't it? And, of course, he's been, it's long overdue. There should have been a gag order on Trump a million years ago, especially with all these criminal trials going on. But for whatever reason, judges have been reluctant to do it or treading lightly on the subject. But, of course, now he's beginning to use his social media platform to, well, among other things, threaten the judge's staff, the lawyers, the potential jurors, etc., etc. So that also much on people's minds. Let's see. What else has he got here? Let's see. Mike Flynn is hawking autographed My Pillows for Navarro's defense. That's the tweet, he says. That may even be just literally true. The whole thing is possible. I don't know if we discussed this, but somewhere tucked away in pocket, because I thought it was funny, is news coverage of the claim, anyway, and I don't see any real reason not to believe it, that the My Pillow guy is now basically broke, that he's just burned tens of millions of dollars on his wacko crusade to convince America, not that they should be sleeping on his pillows, but that I guess they should be sleepwalking through life, so they won't need any pillows. Bad for a pillow company, sleepwalking, really. But sleepwalking through life, not knowing that Donald Trump had in fact been reelected in 2020 and was cheated out of the presidency, etc., etc. So, well, that, and of course, lunatic Mike Flynn, notorious spy, as we all know, just getting worse and worse mental health wise. There it is. It's really for real. Skohaze has the tweet, and well, I have it now. Skohaze made the tweet, and Justice has given it to me, saying, yeah, well, here it is. I mean, it's in quotes, using a screen grab from Raw Story, which makes me figure they must have the actual print story somewhere, in raw form, naturally. Michael Flynn auctions off My Pillow, signed by Mike Lindell, for Peter Navarro's legal fund. And all the dumbest people in one context like this, and then a ruined pillow, which has been signed on top of it all. I mean, the pillow was ruined the minute Mike Lindell manufactured it for you. And then they signed it, which, I don't know. What the hell are you going to do with it? Whatever. Okay, that's life in MAGA America, I guess. And people somehow love that and want to purchase that. And, what can I tell you? There's some people that need help in America. Don't help them. Not with any money. I mean, there are other people who need more help. Lots of other things happening today. I just happened to catch my eye at random. The story from, where is this story from? Is it still on my phone? I don't know. The strange thing occurred to me about it as I was reading yet another, or the story now being revealed of yet another highly questionable, highly problematic police shooting. It actually happened back in May, as I recall from the article. The Intercept was reporting on this one about Justice Department decision not to charge a border control agent who killed a Native American man who lived on Native American reservation territory that either straddles or abuts a large swath of U.S.-Mexico border. And long-ish story, short-ish on this one was that I guess some people broke into the guy's house and demanded to use the phone, and he had assumed they were border crossers, and he chased them off, called the police. Naturally, the police showed up, but of course they showed up in all their tactical gear and their vans and rifles, and like I said, long story short-ish, out comes the homeowner to say, thank God the police are here. And the police, of course, say, a human target, let's kill it. And that's what happened. So, once again, I guess it turns out that people of color are back to never call the police to your house, no matter what. But the claim was, well, we thought he had a gun because he had a phone in his hand. And I was just sort of wondering, this happens so often, and people mistake the cell phone for guns, and we shot. How long has it been the case, would you say, that if a homeowner calls the police to their homestead, right, and they call them and they stay on the dispatchers, of course, say, stay on the phone with us until the police arrive. And then the police arrive, and the natural thing is to go out and greet the police. Thank God you're here. I've been calling and how wonderful for you to serve America, etc. Out they come, and oh my God, he's got a gun, and they shoot him down. And it's a cordless phone, like, we've had those forever. It's a cell phone more than likely these days. But is it 30 plus years? Are we doing no retraining at all for police of any kind? Like, I know everybody is worried about the cell phone in the hand maybe being a gun thing, but how about maybe a chart? I don't know if any of you guys have seen a gun, but they look like this, and they're usually bent at a 90-degree angle, more or less. Whereas these straight things are phones, telephones, sometimes cordless telephones attached to a landline inside. More often than not these days, a cell phone. They look like bricks. You might go, oh my God, he's got a brick in his hand, a very small, thin brick in his hand. But the idea, oh my God, he has a gun. Like, no one ever says, oh my God, he has a pogo stick in his hand. That's the shape they can recognize. That's not it. But, I understand they're under some duress and there's tension and everything, but if you roll in as a tactical unit in black, nighttime SAS assault gear with Kevlar vests and AR-15s or M16s for that matter in your hands, and helmets and God knows what else, and night vision goggles. By the way, what are you seeing? Night vision goggles. That guy has an undetermined object in his hand. If you're wearing vests, you got a second or two. I know you have to make immediate responses, etc. But the reason we bundle you up in the bulletproof gear is so that you can, have the advantage of saying, they might even be able to get a shot off at me with their telephone before we decide to blow them to pieces. There's 16 of us, etc. Got scopes and snipers, etc. But everybody panics at the phones. I don't know what it is, but probably we need to impose a law for safer looking phones. Maybe that's about the sort of legislative response we're likely to get to that one. Anyway, that was not supposed to be a major lead story, but just sort of a, state of America kind of thing. Greg Dworkin is here. He's, actually, I can give you more time if you want to have some breakfast or anything, Greg, but otherwise we'd like to invite you to join us at this point. Good morning. How are you?
Hey, good morning.
Sorry
I'm
to
just
make you
fine.
wait.
Thank you. Thank you for asking.
All right. Well, that's good to know. And got a flu vaccine?
Yes.
Good. All right. I think I mentioned that in the beginning.
I got my COVID vaccine. Tomorrow afternoon, I get my RSV vaccine. They didn't have it.
Oh, I have to think about that.
All three at the same time, so I didn't have to go more than once, but that's okay. I'll get them all before the season.
Okay.
I haven't had any reactions from any of that stuff.
Good news. Right. You should Get all your vaccines done
These
before they
cup
end.
vaccine, and my DNA still hasn't taken over.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's good news. You're magnetic in any way?
No, and
Okay.
I'm
Good.
still writing the same stuff. It really hasn't changed.
Well, that's
So
good.
you
Get your
mentioned,
vaccines before
Trump's
the hurricanes end. Yes, the Trump
we do
hearings.
have a lot to talk about. We have to
Excellent.
talk about
I knew
the
there was something
elections. We have to
real.
talk about the House elections. We have to talk about the Israeli-Hamas war. But for the moment, Scott McFarlane tweeted
Yes.
that it's interesting that given this hearing, in the advance of the hearing,
Yes.
Trump unleashed a social post, quote, leaking crooked and deranged prosecutor Jack Smith, who has a terrible record of failure, is asking a highly partisan Obama-appointed judge
Yeah.
to accuse herself based on the horrible things she has said.
What?
And Jack Smith said this is the kind of stuff he needs a gag order for.
Yeah.
So Trump is really pushing it because he wants a gag order.
Yes, he's
Why
busy
he wants a
predicting
gag order,
it.
is debatable, but he wants one.
Yeah, he'll be a martyr. Marcy Wheeler also says he's been hyping it for weeks, saying, I'm predicting they'll try and gag me. And then he's daring them to gag. And then he'll be like, look, see, I predicted it. I'm so smart.
Or I forced them not to.
Oh.
So Trump won't be in the
that
courtroom,
was an idea,
just
yeah.
so anybody knows.
Mm-hmm.
And Trump defense has previously argued that Trump has not intimidated anybody, so it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Okay.
So it's like a throw me in the briar patch kind of thing.
Yes. I mean, well, all right. So you could handcuff him, then he won't be able to type, or thumb cuff him or something.
Right.
They're very small.
So there was an election in Poland.
Yeah. And
Did you know that?
I did, and I thought there was a glitch in my computer because the guy who won, or the leading opposition, leader, Donald
Tusk.
Tusk. I was like, is this some sort of weird Eastern Bloc copyright knockoff thing?
Yeah, translation, right? So of interesting, very, very interesting situation.
But he's apparently the good guy there.
Well, if there is such thing.
Yeah,
the Law
I don't
and
know,
Justice
really.
Party are the bad guys for sure. They're the ones that have been in power, I think, for something
How
like
could
8
they
years.
be bad? What was
But
that?
first of
Law
all,
and
to
Order.
start with, this was the largest Polish turnout. Poles going to the polls. So to
Yes.
speak.
Oh, okay. That's a better line than how many Polish voters does it take to,
72.9%.
So all of them. Yeah.
All of them.
That's right. What are you
All of
talking
them
about?
went.
They did exactly what the Americans are supposed to do. Where have you been, Americans?
And part of the reason is that because the ruling party, Law and Justice, is so right-wing and nasty, it controls the equivalent of PBS and NPR. So with
is
the public
nasty.
stations, they've been attacking the opposition,
Oh, that's
saying this is an existential issue, that, you have to vote for us. We are for stability, against migrants, against crime. But although those were issues,
that kind of law and
the
justice.
biggest issue,
Yeah.
abortion. It turned out that
Wow.
when Law and Justice was in power, they severely restricted abortion. Interestingly, not by criminalizing it for women, but criminalizing it for the doctors.
Oh,
Nonetheless, you couldn't get an abortion in Poland, so Polish women who wanted to get abortions had to go to like Germany to find a Polish doctor, that kind of thing.
that is complex and unpopular.
Right. So here is a story. Let's see when this is from. 22/9, September 22, 2023. It's 22/9 because it's, of course, European.
Right.
Their circumstances are unbelievable. How will women vote in Poland's next election? First of all, we don't exactly know what the final result is. We only know the exit polls. It looks like the ruling party needed something, I forget the exact number, 239, something like that. They got 200 seats.
Okay.
The three opposition parties, center and center-left, mostly center, got more than that, more than enough to form a government. And other coalitions don't seem possible with the ruling party because everybody's refusing to work with them.
Okay.
It was so unpopular. 2/3 of women hate what the Polish government has done with the abortion rules, according to previous polls, on the polls.
What?
If you ask a poll about the polls, what they'll tell you is that it was extremely unpopular there. And that's one of the reasons that this was driven to happen. It was certainly an urban versus rural kind of thing.
Oh.
And the ruling party appears to have lost. So we'll see exactly what happens.
Fraud?
Donald Tusk is the leader of the second leading party, and that's how come you're reading about Donald Tusk.
Yeah, I am baffled by that.
They basically want to loosen the abortion laws, stop going after LGBT community. The ruling party was presenting themselves as extremely Polish Catholic, not just Catholic, Polish Catholic.
Okay.
In attacking LGBT communities and clamping down on abortion and such. So Donald Tusk's Civic Coalition Party wants to reverse a lot of that. And there were predictions that this would happen because women were really, really angry about all of this.
Yes.
And it would just be a pretty amazing thing if, Dobbs turns out to be not just an issue here in the U.S., but also everywhere.
But we didn't even do that to you. But okay, well, abortion an issue everywhere. And I don't know, any claims of election fraud?
Dobbs, the issue it represents.
Yes. The ruling party not attempting to claim that there was voter fraud or anything. They're just
sure.
lost.
I mean, the first thing they said when it looked like they were losing is, we don't trust what happens in the cities.
Because they're full of Polish people.
Because they're full of Polish people who vote for the other guy.
Yeah. All right. Well, maybe that's what they were worried about, the previous polls. Too many previous polls who are no longer polls went to the polls.
So this is the New York Times to get you out of this loop that you're in here. You have to reboot. A pivotal election in Poland. Here's what to know from the New York Times. Centrist and progressive forces appear to be in the best position to form a new government, according to exit polling. That would be a blow to the governing nationalist coalition.
Right. Okay. Can understand that. Thankfully, the New York Times knows what we need to know. Thank God.
If the early forecasts hold, Civic Coalition, that's Donald Tusk's party, the second one, and its potential partners will have won 248 seats in the 460-member Sejm, the more powerful lower house of parliament, compared with 200 won by Law and Justice. Civic Coalition and Law and Justice had offered Polish voters drastically different interpretations of the country's recent history. The parliamentary election had been depicted by all political sides as pivotal for Poland, existential. Each side had sought to rally their supporters by presenting the other as an existential threat to the country. Law and Justice portrayed itself as the defender of Polish sovereignty in ordinary polls against the elites in the cities and the European Union. Civic Coalition vowed to bring Poland back to Europe. By casting their votes on Sunday, polls are making a judgment on the legacy of Poland's post-1989 transition from communism. I think more people turned out in this election than that election.
There was, I did see that idea bandied about that there's at least the largest turnout since then. So like one of two enormously important elections in the span of the 45-year history.
Right.
Okay.
What were the main themes? The campaign was particularly vicious, with Poland's public broadcasting system, a network of television and radio stations controlled by Law and Justice, pumping out nonstop vitriol. In a bid to drum up support, the governing party was willing to damage Poland's relationship with important allies like Germany and Ukraine, undermining Warsaw's efforts to present itself as a stable pillar of Western solidarity. Law and Justice painted a picture of a country under attack, with the war in Ukraine raging next door and the issue of migration, especially with Belarus, where migrants in the Middle East and Europe seek to cross into the European Union.
I mean,
and it declared it was the only guarantee for keeping Poland safe. So they did the caravans thing.
Huh.
And it didn't work.
What do you know? Did we send them our guy who ran for governor here years ago?
Ed, whatever his name is, Gillespie.
I know. I'm trying to think. He's fading from memory. Ed Sheeran.
Parenthesis, whatever his name is, and parenthesis, Gillespie.
Right. Okay. Wow. All right. Well, I guess I'm glad of that result. It's interesting to see that that sort of platform is beatable. Interesting, also weird twist, having the national broadcasting outfits on their side. They're not quite like they are here, I guess. So, but as you said, controlling the equivalent of NPR and PBS, I'm thinking like, are they putting out like racist tote bags or something? What do you mean? Oh, okay.
Well, alongside the parliamentary election, according to the New York Times, the government also held a referendum to ask Poles their views on admitting thousands of illegal migrants from the Middle East and Africa. Not that the question was
skewed. But they wouldn't be illegal if we're asking this question.
And on selling our national wealth to foreign entities.
Wow. I imagine they thought that was going to be unpopular.
To give you an idea of the party in power, and what sort of stuff they were doing.
Right, I get you. That they would phrase the question this way. All right, and still people rejected them. Good.
Well, no, we don't know that yet.
How about
we won't have those results till tomorrow.
Oh.
But Human Rights Watch said the questions were, quote, loaded, end quote, and spread misinformation, and for the referendum results to be valid, at least 50% of citizens must take part in it. So it'd be interesting to see if the protest vote is not to vote.
Oh. I don't know. I mean, if they were already there in record numbers to vote.
Right, but they know what they're doing. It would just be interesting to see if that, in fact, is what happens.
How do they... We need to speak to these people about how they got voters educated and strategically prompted how to vote, because we don't know how to do that. Yeah. All right. Well, we'll ask them afterwards. We'll see what the results are, and then well, I guess we should see first before we ask them.
But maybe
they're just as bad as we are.
Obviously, you mentioned Ed Gillespie, but you could just feel parallel themes here.
Yeah.
Whether it's Dobbs and how the reaction was, whether it's Caravans and how the reaction was, we'll see how the referendum goes. It's so slanted, I don't know what to make of it. But I guess there'll be a lot more commentary about that when we find out the results. And, of course, what we find out the ultimate results here. Now, Civic Coalition, the people that won with a pledge to reverse what's described as an undemocratic change in news media and the judiciary. And that's one of the things they were doing, is trying to get rid of the judiciary the way Netanyahu was in Israel. This is not a popular thing, but authoritarian governments like to do this.
Yes, but I mean, they not read the news?
They're not subtle. They don't do it the way that the U.S. does it by sneaking in billions of dollars to change things. They just do it outright.
I guess.
Where you can get caught.
Yeah. I mean, the story of the outcomes aren't exactly written already here and in Israel. So I guess there's some question, can we get away with it? And they must think, well, they didn't do a very good job at it, but we will.
Well, it looks like the attempt in Israel is it
looks like it's...
I hesitate to use the term, so let's just say it's finished.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we think so. But then always they do too. But yeah, like another country we'll analyzing it might
the
think
unpopularity
we can do
of
it right.
Netanyahu at this point is just unbelievable, and he's just simply not got the political power to do stuff he wants to do anymore. It'll be interesting to see if he survives without having to resign.
Yeah, well,
I mean, everywhere he goes, people are screaming
at
him, "You're a liar, and you did this." I mean, just to give you a flavor.
Yeah, it's not good, and a bit of a surprise. I mean, the usual reaction in a usual situation where you have a stock of goodwill in your country, which he doesn't. There's the rally around the flag thing, and they're like, well, we'll rally around the flag, but we'll use it to hit you with it.
And then this happened, and job number one for the government is security. And that was completely blown out of the water. Then he wasn't visible, and then he refused to speak with the family members of those who had their families taken hostage.
Yeah,
which are now a big political entity in Israel. And comfort was gotten not from Netanyahu, but from the leader of the free world, the United States, Joe Biden, who's now incredibly popular in Israel, which sort of undercuts all the stuff about Republicans saying, oh, sleepy Joe Biden doesn't know what he's doing, and, so on and so forth.
Yes, and it made Trump mad, as you told us last week.
Yeah, so it made Trump mad. And then Biden gave an interview last night on 60 Minutes, which was pretty solid. They said he was tired. They noted that when he's under stress, he stutters more, which is not the same thing as mentally incapacitated, I should point out. And I was watching on Twitter, and it was funny because all the 3-follower, 9 previous tweet folks were out saying, "Oh, what a terrible interview this was for Biden." On Twitter.
No.
And
yeah,
so
to no one.
The bots are back, in other words.
Okay. Well, somebody's paying for them again,
Sure.
I guess. Maybe, or the check might bounce. I don't know. But all right.
We don't know. But
not surprising.
The way things are rolling out, Biden is putting pressure on Israel, for example, to turn some of the water on in Gaza, the southern Gaza part. Not so easy to do because you need electricity to do that, and the pipes have to not be bombed.
Right.
There's pressure on Egypt to open the border to at least let out dual nationals. That hasn't happened, but the pressure is there. Blinken is making the rounds with Qatar and all the other Arab countries trying to put pressure on. So far, there hasn't been a full-scale invasion. Everybody expects that there will be. Biden keeps talking, the first couple of days, you did the diplomatic thing. We totally and absolutely support Israel in all ways, and then privately restraint. And now publicly restraint. That won't, hold forever. Israel is so upset about what happened, they're going to do stuff. That's just going to happen.
Yes.
But Netanyahu leading that, not so much. That's why there's a forced on him emergency government coalition, including the opposition. And it'll probably be the opposition, giving orders to the army because Netanyahu doesn't know how to do this.
And they haven't been happy with him for quite some time because of the other stuff that we mentioned
Right, so
earlier.
the idea that everybody's going to rally around him, not only is that not happening, it's just getting worse for him. He literally can't go anywhere in public without getting screamed at.
Okay.
If not spat on.
Ew. Yuck, gross. Well, I understand the sentiment, certainly. I don't know if I'd be spitting on him, but I'm not there. I'm a very polite guy, so. All right, we'll be right back. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We continue. Greg Dworkin still with it. That was a fast half hour, it seems like. It was about 30 minutes long, as it turns out, but felt like less. So, and you're muted, so you ran out of time to turn your mute button back on.
Yeah, well, we're back.
Okay. So, we were in, well, I don't know. We jumped around a little bit. We were in Poland.
Well, we were doing international stuff.
Yes, right. Israel, U.S.-Mexico border.
Lots of tension in Israel because nobody knows what's happening next, but there's not much more to say about it at this particular point in time other than note that the Republican response to this is all over the place. And the Democratic response is also sort of divided, but for the most part, at least the polls are saying, the American polls are saying, that Democrats are rallying around Biden's approach, and Republicans
him, but not the other guy.
Can't decide what to do because they can criticize Biden, and they will, but it's obvious that Israel especially, but at least the governments in Europe, which is different than what people are doing on the street, are also rallying behind Israel and Biden. And so, he's being an effective American president, which is what you normally would expect in normal times of an American president. And Republicans don't quite know how to handle that. And at the same time, they are faced with the governance issue of, okay, how can we support Israel? The Senate knows how to do this, and the GOP House, where they still have a technical majority but not a functional majority, do not know how to do this. In fact, they don't know how to do anything. They can't even elect themselves a speaker. No. And so that's the next topic we're going to talk about.
Okay, yeah, so I knew we had to get to that. By the way, I note that on Twitter, among the trending topics, inexplicably, except maybe now you'll explain it, is John Boehner is among the trending topics. I don't know why, but I have a guess. But obviously it has to do with your next area of discussion, the speakership.
Well, yeah. I mean, so maybe Boehner should be speaker. I don't know.
Maybe that was it. I think it's probably a joke, but still. It's only even remotely funny if the underlying fact is, how long has it been now? It's going to go on 2 weeks since they ejected McCarthy.
Well, one of our commenters at Daily Kos astutely noted that, the problem with McCarthy is that he was trying to bribe everybody into voting for him. And then that didn't work, and they threw him out, and they turned to Steve Scalise, who was essentially trying the old guard way of giving everybody perks and sweeteners in order to vote for him.
Okay.
And that didn't work. And so now we have Jordan, who is the candidate who, since our last show, beat Scalise and couldn't get enough votes to actually be the speaker. So all the votes were postponed over the weekend. He tried to work up support by threatening everybody.
I'll make you.
And in fact, some of the people who he was threatening didn't like being threatened. And so they anonymously released some of the stuff, which is including Sean Hannity's staff.
Yes.
Writing the Congress people saying, really you better get in line with Jordan because we want to know why you're not behind him because our listeners will want to know this, and it'd be a shame if something happened to your congressional career. Exactly. It's a nice congressional career, and you really ought to think about what you're doing here. And that was not going over well. He still doesn't have the votes. And so the current plan is to have everybody come back over the weekend to Washington.
That's now. Okay.
Jordan gets to talk to them, try to bully them and intimidate them into voting for him. When he doesn't have enough votes, he's going to try to push a floor vote tomorrow. Now, remember, the previous 2 votes that he lost, the first one, was to an unknown Austin Scott guy from Georgia, who didn't even want to be speaker, just wanted to be a vehicle for anti-Jordan sentiment. That was a secret vote, and he lost. He won, but not enough to put him over 217. Okay. And then the second vote, which was pushed by McCarthy,
and they listened.
McCarthy was to say, okay, let's see how many votes he would have on the floor, him against nothing, and he still lost 55 votes.
I don't even understand how you arrange that, but okay. What about him versus nothing?
And, there are no rules because there's no speaker, so they can do whatever the hell they want.
I guess.
But anyway, so then they do this, and so McCarthy is trying to back Jordan in his run.
He is?
And, McCarthy's the one that arranged a second vote. McCarthy said everybody should rally around Jordan. I think he has enough votes. McCarthy is notoriously a terrible vote counter, so that means Jordan doesn't have enough votes.
That seems like it was
But my point there in telling you this story is that every time people say, well, why didn't the Democrats rally around McCarthy and vote for him? Look what the guy does.
I guess.
Nobody trusts him, and there's no freaking way the Democrats would ever vote for this guy.
It would be extremely difficult to get a large body of Democrats to cooperate with Republicans about a partisan election.
first of all.
Yes,
but
normally,
in particular, this
but on
guy.
top of this, yeah, right.
I mean, they're much more likely to rally around Scalise than they would either McCarthy or Jordan for different reasons.
Right. Like, what an embarrassment. Well, you can't rally around this guy. No one he doesn't rally.
Jordan's
people.
awful, and McCarthy you don't trust. I mean, either way, you're just not voting for them.
Yeah.
So,
all right.
As Jordan's plan is to bring it to the House on Tuesday, where it's not a private secret ballot, it's rather a public ballot. Mm-hmm. That way, when he loses, he gets to see what his strength really is, how much the browbeating has helped, and more importantly, identify the holdout so he can intimidate them further. That's his plan. And that's why intimidation was the weekend watchword. That's why everybody was talking about how he's intimidating people, and that's not necessarily going to work. Some of the powerful committee members who don't fear Fox News and Sean Hannity, appropriations, etc., are saying we got easily double-digit figures against him, and he can't afford to lose more than 4, so he's not going to be the next speaker. Now, as this is happening, people are circulating stuff about Jordan. I've read more about the Ohio State scandal in the last 4 or 5 days than I have in the last 2 or 3 years.
Well, this will focus it. Yeah. All right.
And at the same time, this quote from John Boehner, which explains how come he was trending, is circulating. Jordan was a terrorist as a legislator, he wrote in his book, a legislative terrorist. I just never saw a guy who spent more time tearing things apart, never building anything, never putting anything together. That's a John Boehner quote. That's how come he's trending.
Okay, I see. That makes some sense. I saw a similar sentiment. Who was it? Was it? Well, I'll think I can find it. But somebody saying, by the way, what's his legislative record, Jordan? Like, how many bills has he passed?
0.
Yeah. And although somebody else was putting it like, who passed more bills? He was
less effective in his, 19 years or however many years he was there. He was less effective than Madison Cawthorn was.
That's what it was. That's what I was thinking of. Somebody put him side by side, and he only had 1 term. Cawthorn. I don't know.
But at least got some votes on some
bills.
Yeah. Jordan didn't even do that because he didn't even submit any.
Right, and he wears no jacket.
So Jordan's entire shtick is making noise. And Boehner knew this. Everybody knows this. Everybody in Congress knows that. Again, you have to scratch your head and say, well, why are they backing him then?
Why are they backing him?
Because some of them are like that themselves. Mm-hmm. This is really the culmination, the culminating point, as they talk about in intellectual discussions of warfare. This is the culminating point of the candidate in a box.
Yeah.
I would argue that here you have people who don't know what else to do. They're powerless and paralyzed because they don't have a leader telling them what to do. And so they're rallying around whoever is the current, even though it was different 3 days ago.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a guy at a microphone.
Of the party, and did we talk about this on Thursday, the Elise Stefanik stuff?
No. What?
It's just really funny because Elise Stefanik is the epitome of candidate in a box. Yeah. Kevin McCarthy's running. She's in leadership. Mm-hmm. And, when Kevin McCarthy was threatened with a motion to vacate, there was a vote on Kevin McCarthy. And, she would tweet stuff like, we support Speaker Kevin McCarthy. And then he lost.
Yeah.
And then Steve Scalise was the one who beat Jordan in the runoff there to be, okay, who's next? Mm-hmm. And she tweets, we congratulate Speaker-elect Scalise. And then Scalise quits. And then Jim Jordan is the one who's running. And she tweets, guess what? Wait for it. We congratulate Speaker-elect Jordan. It's like, I don't even know who to suck up to next.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. I don't have a leader. I'm stuck. I'm exposed. I have nothing. I can't argue in any way, shape, or form why you should support these people. I'm just a suck up, and I'm going to suck up to whoever it is I'm supposed to suck up to. But everybody can see it. They're comparing yesterday's to 3 days ago to 5 days ago. And, I look awful. But what am I going to do?
I guess. Or
run
she's
for speaker,
the
I guess.
Sports Illustrated of the House of Representatives, right? Like the Sports Illustrated curse, put somebody on the cover and they lose. And she's just going to do that to everybody until she's the only one who hasn't tried to run for speaker. And then, it doesn't help her any. But, okay. Well, leaderless, directionless,
talentless.
Yeah. No bench for this.
It's the culmination of candidate in a box, which you've taught us about all these years. It's exactly what you would expect to happen if you take the approach that that's what they're doing.
Yeah. It only works if there's somebody it worked for a while when there was someone in leadership who was the established leader and who cultivated this idea that you'll all want to learn to speak about the issues like me. It was a very overt goal of the Newt Gingrich machine that, the kickoff to the whole thing, that much celebrated focus grouped list of words to use, etc., was all premised from the idea. The memo that came along with it said, I've been approached so many times. The number one question from candidates is, how can I learn to speak like Newt? Well, here's how.
Again, to step back and look at the big picture here, Jim Jordan is not guaranteed to lose. He's just probably going to lose.
Well, he's a loser.
Certainly, his opposition, which numbers at least 55, from the last vote, 90% of that will fold.
Yes, okay. I think you're right.
But the question is, will enough fold? Does he still get the votes he needs, or are there enough holdouts? His opposition claims they've got a solid double digit against him, whoever else folds. So over the next day or two, he's going to roll out the people that he's intimidated, saying, well, I had a nice talk with him and I changed my mind.
Yes, that's what happens a lot.
Yeah. That doesn't mean he gets enough to win. It doesn't mean he gets enough to lose. We'll have to wait and see what happens tomorrow. But the fact that he's just out in the open intimidating people is, again, just like Stefanik, these guys are exposed.
Mm-hmm. Well, if he needs some suggestions for turning people's minds, he could give them a lot of seats on the Rules Committee and make it possible for one member to bring a motion to vacate the chair. That has worked in the past in terms of getting the votes necessary.
Right.
You might consider that.
Right. Our friend Aaron Frischner, who is Don Byer's chief of staff, reminds people get revved up, but you need to understand that even the most Biden district Republicans aren't moderates. Mm-hmm. Right. Working with Democrats would require a break with their party, and they've shown over and over again they're terrified of that.
Yes.
Okay.
We shouldn't expect that of them.
Republicans' public commentary about working with Democrats is directed at other Republicans to pressure them, not because they really want to work with Democrats, in other words.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Right.
I could buy that.
So whenever you hear a Republican talking to reporters about working with Democrats, keep in mind their intended audience is other Republicans.
So they mean to say we don't want to do this.
Right. We're not going to do this, but we want you to think that we will so that you'll be reasonable. And that won't work because the other people they're talking to are not reasonable. Mm-hmm. And that's why if Jordan loses, he's going to lose by 8 votes, not 188 votes.
Okay.
That's what I'm trying to tell you.
All right. I can buy that. I don't have any money, but I mean.
Anyway, taking all of that into consideration, wrapping it all up.
Yes.
People still expect Jordan to lose.
They're good. I hope so. I certainly. I wouldn't. I would be very upset if he.
They expect that if he does win and pull it out, that is tantamount to the Republicans losing the House in 2024.
Oh, okay. Well, I would like that too.
That's the reason why some of his opposition may stay.
They think
strong, if you want to call it that.
Okay. Well. I don't know if it pleases them and they are able to keep him from the speakership, and then I'll call them strong. Sure.
Right.
Okay.
Anyway,
this is confusing, and there's just no indication that there's anybody that they would unite behind. It was looking more and more like they might just want to end up temporarily and on a case by case basis empowering McHenry to continue.
Mr. Bowtie.
Yeah, he's excited about all this, I assume.
Well, he doesn't want.
No, he doesn't want the job.
He doesn't want the headache.
Well,
he'd rather be
good
John Boehner than Kevin McCarthy.
I guess so. Well, we'll see how long this drags on. It's been quite a while. Like I said, it's going on 2 weeks now since they ejected their speaker. I just don't understand what he's doing playing in this game again. You'd think he would sit down and shut up, but I guess he still believes that... there's 200 of them here who still wish I was the speaker. So, maybe that's a basis from which to be meddling again. But
Yeah. Well, what to look for if you want to follow these things is to see what the Armed Services Committee and Appropriations Committee members, GOP members, do with Jordan. They're probably, his staunchest opposition, and therefore your best bet to follow whether or not he's making any inroads.
All right. That's a good tip. Well, I mean, they're not talking to me, so I don't know, but we'll see what they say in the papers.
Mm-hmm.
The funny papers. Anyway. Okay.
All right. So
now
let's look at what we started to talk about a little bit with Netanyahu. This is a really interesting piece by Ruth Ben-Ghiat, who studies authoritarians.
Uh-huh. She's the authority?
She's authority on authoritarians.
All right.
One of them. What will be the destiny of Netanyahu? The tragic Hamas attacks on Israel prompt reflections on the strongman model of leadership.
All right.
And in December 2022, Netanyahu thought he had won the autocrats' lottery, having been reelected despite charges of bribery, fraud, and breach of trust. Sound familiar?
Yes.
And a corruption trial ongoing. He promptly initiated judicial reform that would limit the Israeli Supreme Court's authority and clear the way for him to realize the strongman dream, becoming personally untouchable by the law. That's what Orban likes to do in Hungary. That's what the ruling party was trying to do in Poland, although a bit more slowly. And that's what Republicans would like to do, only a little bit more insidiously. Instead, she writes, this authoritarian overreach led to the largest protests in Israeli history, protests that united grassroots activists and elites and included refusals by Army and Air Force personnel to perform military service, but Netanyahu didn't back down. Propelled by a desire for self-preservation and unencumbered by any moral code, strong men with legal troubles that threaten their power become laser-focused on making the troubles go away.
All right.
The Hamas attacks thus came at a moment of deep fissures within Israeli society. The sense of a vacuum of leadership that privileges collective welfare increased when the prime minister and his Likud party didn't communicate properly with the public after the attack, when state, military, law enforcement, and emergency personnel did not reach civilians under fire quickly, leading to lone wolf heroic rescues, and the total system failure on Israel's part, in former ambassador to Israel Martin Indych's word, has prompted civilian and military calls for Netanyahu to resign. That's why you're not seeing the rally round effect. Former Israeli Defense Minister Moshe Yaalon pointed out, for example, that Bibi can't be an effective wartime leader because Israelis don't trust him. This also reports that Netanyahu didn't listen to expert advice, recurrent strongman habit, and I describe its deleterious consequences in detail in my book, which you can read and buy. Netanyahu also did not seem to care that empowering his far-right extremist partners, like Minister of National Security Itamar Ben-Gvir, has been convicted of supporting terrorism, to try and realize their fantasies of a Jewish ethno-state and West Bank annexation, and that could have dangerous consequences for the nation. So, repression of Palestinian human and political rights has been the default solution, along with giving Palestinians some limited economic benefits. That this was not tenable didn't interest him. So now he's formed an emergency government with the opposition National Unity Party, and Benny Gantz, the leader of that party, is far more popular than Netanyahu is. As news of the level of Hamas violence circulates, hardening the will for revenge, we can expect the government to continue to punish Palestinian civilians. To survive politically, Netanyahu needs to redeem himself through conflict, but several problems will remain, and one of them is his partnership with extremists. Don't forget, he was trying to boost Hamas, and everybody knows it. And the other is that Netanyahu, a strong man to the core, will instinctively continue to act in ways that privilege his personal interests. And that's already happening. There are individual stories of both he and his wife, who's very politically active, interfering with the armies trying to do things for reasons of, for example, shunting money to the settlers and away from the army and other things that simply aren't particularly helpful to Israeli society at this moment.
To be screwing the army. That seems bad.
Temperamentally and ideologically, she writes, Netanyahu is not the leader to solve these problems. Right now, as the violence spirals, we can only hope he doesn't provide another example of a pattern authoritarian leader behavior summarized in the conclusion of my book. As one country after another has discovered, the strong man is at his worst as a leader when he's most needed by his country. So, again, we'll see how Poland reacts to the ruling party losing. We'll see how Netanyahu reacts to all of the pressure. So far, he's mostly reacted by trying to be invisible, not showing up, not talking to people. That's what's pissing everybody off. So that's not working particularly well.
Got to go to the Israeli diners.
Yeah, well, when he goes to the Israeli diner, they yell at him, and so that's not working all that well.
Sorry, you're just going to have to be there and take it.
Another take on this, similar theme, David Rothkopf writing in the Daily Beast, the war's just started, but Benjamin Netanyahu's already lost.
Okay.
It's not too early to draw certain conclusions. One is that highly unlikely the Iranian-funded terror group will survive this war. That's Hamas. Another is that Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is almost certain to be brought down, and many of his highest priorities dashed due to the widespread perception among the Israeli public that it was Netanyahu's leadership failures that put the public at risk of the attack, an assault that resulted in the single greatest day loss of Israeli lives in that country's history. That's the kind of thing you can't just pepper over or paper over, I should say, with commercials.
Yeah, right. He did not preside over the largest number of Israeli deaths in the country's history. That's that's a hell of a thing to have hung around your neck. So yeah, it'll take an awful lot of work to get out from underneath that, and it doesn't sound like the sort of thing you could escape in the process of 1, 10, or 50 elections. It's going to be a problem for Likud forever.
Yeah.
Well,
so
it should
affects
maybe
things that happen there certainly affect politics here, and the way that it affects politics here are very unclear. And we'll need more time to really get to the bottom of some of that stuff.
We don't even know who's supposed to be reacting to it for one of them.
And how they're supposed to be reacting.
Yeah, one party has it very clear, and the other one, they're never sure.
It does seem pretty clear that you can't just Israel can do whatever they want. So that's what Lindsey Graham is doing.
Mm-hmm.
And Tom Cotton. So if if they are saying that whatever happens, the important thing is that Gaza be reduced to rubble, that is not the approach you should take, and that's not the approach the Democrats will take. That's not the approach anybody should take. Mm. But what is the right approach? Well, it depends. It depends, what Israel does next. The U.S. is trying to push restraint, but that requires cooperation, and how much cooperation is available in that region is limited.
Yes. I mean, I think that's fair enough. Not difficult to believe that. It's going to be very tough. I don't know. I mean, it's just going to complicate things.
I'm happy there's somebody with a little bit of foreign policy experience there. I could think of people who would do a worse job.
Yes.
And I'll leave it at that for now.
Okay. Well, good. We hope that the Republicans will leave it there, too. I mean, they really don't have much else to go on but to, shriek that something about what Biden is doing is wrong, because they'll have no suggestions that make any sense for positive agenda at this point. And no one wants to hear it anyway. I mean, the only thing that the United States can do at this stage, you can't step in and try and lead the situation. That's not going to fly either. No matter how many Israelis you might get on their side, they are going to want to do this their way and themselves. Similarly among Palestinians. So not a lot of appetite for American intervention here. So, but that'll also limit you in terms of your ability to convince people not to go crazy either. So we're still waiting and still holding our breath. Mm. Okay. Well,
that's about it for me. That's the main stuff. You can
hold your breath all the way to Wednesday, and that's fine. All right. If you think of anything else along the way, as usually happens, even when you go all the way to the last second and beyond, there's always something else that comes up. So feel free, drop us a line. Otherwise, Wednesday will be the next time we check in with you. And any public services going on today, or workmen coming to the home that we could expect, or
not on my end.
Okay, all right,
your roof seems not leaking.
Yeah, drip. That is mostly taken care of. So I think we're good there. And then we can go on to important stories like, why was George Santos running around the halls of Congress holding a baby that wasn't his and nobody knew whose it was? Did you see that story? I haven't seen that straightened out
But
yet.
it wasn't just that. He was running around Congress holding a baby and yelling at reporters.
Yes.
Because outside of Trump, and even more than Jim Jordan, George Santos is the most performative member of Congress possible.
Yeah.
He saw cameras. He saw a baby and said, I can do something with this. This is, what's my line anyway? And, I do improv.
Literally, there's no
Here's a baby. Let's do some
explanation
improv
for
with the
this
baby.
yet. And, all I have for you in this one is a New York Magazine piece. George Santos has a meltdown while holding mystery baby.
Yeah.
And they literally
I think it was
don't
one
want
of
to
the
solve the
staffers,
mystery.
but why, anybody would let George Santos near a baby, I don't know.
I don't know. Maybe he was hungry.
Yeah. That's what I was worried about. I didn't know how close it was to dinner, and I really worried about the kid. But
Chupacabra George Santos is going to eat him. I don't know. But yeah, and he had a weird thing. Apparently somebody did ask. So, trying to get to the bottom of it, the reporter said, well, whose baby is that? Is that your baby? And he said, not yet.
Yeah. That's when I started worrying about dinner.
Right. What do you mean? Like, not yet? Like, I'm waiting for the Frank's hot sauce to arrive? Yeah, not yet?
Exactly.
I don't know. So, I mean, that's really all there is to that story. This is not much more. I don't have to tease it to the next segment. That's what George Santos is doing. Plus, also, of course, carrying 23 indictments or indictments on 23 counts or something like that.
23, 91's the record,
Yeah, right. You're a piker. So at that point, he was like, I don't think Trump has ever stolen and eaten a baby. Let him see him try to do that.
That we know of.
Yeah, right. He's a germaphobe. I'll definitely beat him to the punch on this one. Right. But maybe not. I don't know. We don't know.
Yeah, but what if you put ketchup on it?
Right. You can get him to eat just about anything.
Then it tastes like hamburger.
He said, don't put it past Trump to eat a baby. Oh, boy. All right. Well,
live on TV.
Yeah. All
right.
Right.
Say the Democrats made me. All right. That's it for me. I will talk to you on Wednesday.
All right.
Where's the music? Come on. Where's the music?
You're about 20 seconds for music. You want to dance around a little bit? You're going to have to do it without the music.
Yeah, I suppose.
But okay.
Democrats had a strong fundraising quarter.
Ahead. Yeah.
At least in the Senate.
Good.
They outraised their GOP opponents in West Virginia, Montana, Ohio, and Texas and Florida.
Okay, well, that's not too hard to do. In fact, there is a story about that I have tucked away about Jim Justice, who is is he the Republican nominee for Senate in West Virginia. He's in Mike Lindell territory, I guess. His coal business is apparently falling apart and losing money hand over fist. Who knew that was possible? So
talk to you
good.
Wednesday.
All right, very good. We made it all the way to the hour then. Thanks, Greg. We'll see you Wednesday, and until then, we'll just keep guessing as to what the hell's going on. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's see what we have on time for you. Well, let's see. I teased you with the story. Well, one, I did the George Santos thing, but literally that was the story. And what I really found fascinating about the New Yorker piece that I put aside, or New York Magazine, it's good. You should, we should read it and discuss it. And it's relatively short too. Why not? We'll share it. And I just liked the style of it. So we'll just take a moment to appreciate the approach taken here. It's a little unusual. George Santos has meltdown while holding mystery baby. It is written by Margaret Hartman, who has, puts it this way. Journalists tend to like reporting the news. That should not be news to you, right? There's a whole cringy scene about it in the newsroom. Generally, this involves telling readers what happened, as well as what it might mean, in case you've missed the whole development of journalism in Western culture. But sometimes we have no idea what's going on, and it's actually more fun if we keep it that way. Now you begin to see what she's doing with this story here. This is one of those moments. So here's what happened. We've all had an extremely long week, as you're likely aware. On Friday afternoon, George Santos, the New York representative, whose tally of alleged federal crimes is now up to, 23, was spotted screaming in the hallway of the Longworth House office building. It appears Santos, who famously suggested his family was Jewish and then revised this to Jewish. I mean, that's an interesting thing to pick out among the many infractions, but okay. Well, he was accosted on his way through the hallways, and that's why this selection from among his many misdeeds is important. Was accosted by pro-Palestinian protesters, who honestly probably would be happy to shout at anybody. There's an emergency going on. But I don't know whether they even knew. It may have been the case that they had no idea who they were yelling at, other than that he was a member of Congress and wearing the pin. They may actually have known, this is a great idea, let's yell at George Santos because he always gets cameras. They may possibly have been aware of the one time of the claim of his Jewishness, but they were probably also likely aware that, no, he ended up saying, no, I'm not Jewish. So I don't know. We don't know how much that had to do with anything. But here it is. He had famously suggested his family was Jewish, then revised it to Jewish. Now he's accosted by pro-Palestinian protesters. Normally, neither a small protest on Capitol Hill, which is what this, after all, really was, nor George Santos shouting in front of a gaggle of reporters would be all that notable. But there's a twist. Santos was holding a 2-month-old baby when all of this went down. And I did start to wonder, did he grab somebody's baby to say, now they won't harass me because I'll be carrying a baby? But then I can't help but be baited into confrontation, and so I'm going to end up in a fight with this baby in hands. I don't know. Anyway, herein embedded is the tweet of one Reese Gorman, who says, Santos gets into it with protesters, there's some video, who were accosting him in the hallway about the ongoing genocide of Palestinians by Israelis. That was in quotes there. Santos was holding a 2-month-old baby when they first started accosting him. I don't know whether he thought that was protection. Then Nolan McCaskill tweeting, what just happened in Longworth, with video of the confrontation. Now, you probably have a lot of questions right now, as do I, says our author, Margaret Hartman. But too bad for your questions. I think it's best that we just send our best wishes to this mystery baby and end the week on this perfect and utterly bonkers tweet. A photo of Santos carrying the baby. No view of the crowd accosting him, but Matt Rice sent this tweet out. George Santos just left Tim Burchett's office. Not his office, but Tim Burchett's, does he say Burchett or Burchett's office, with a baby in his arms. When asked if it was his baby, he said, not yet. And literally, that is it. That is all Margaret's going to give us on this one. This was an interesting approach. The reporter saying, I don't know what happened. I don't have a guess what happened. You shouldn't have a guess what happened. It could be anything. The world of George Santos is too bizarre for us to come up with a real explanation. We're just going to have to say, this is what we observed. We don't know what this means. It's anathema usually to journalists, but this time the temptation is too strong. So there you go. That's the story. Nobody knows. I don't know. Somebody must know whose baby that is. They're not talking to the press. Maybe the press is no longer interested in finding out. I just thought that was interesting, a different approach to the news, to say the least. I also hinted to you that Jim Justice, not Jim Jordan, but Jim Justice, was having some issues. Politico reported this the other day. I haven't seen a big splash about this yet, but this feels like one of those stories that, I don't know, it'll become important later in the campaign. And you'll say, oh yeah, I know that because I heard it on KITM. And then we'll say, but you heard it on KITM because Politico pays reporters to cover this stuff. Now, wait until you find out who is the reporter on this, under the headline of Lawyers for Jim Justice say his coal companies, quote, companies are, I guess, quote, chronically scarce on cash, which is an odd thing for A, for a company, and B, for a coal company, which you would think, oh, you know, fossil fuels. At the least, they're rolling in dough. They've been exploiting the the world and everybody in it for a long time and ripping them off and making them rich. And Jim Justice had become a rich man doing this. So what happened here? And I don't know whether he got My Pillow Guide out of his money or what happened. A string of legal challenges is the answer. A string of legal challenges against the West Virginia governor show that the coal baron's sprawling business enterprise is struggling to pay its bills. And I'd be interested to find out whether it's struggling to pay its bills because of mismanagement, because coal is a dying industry, because he's blowing all his money on propping up Donald Trump. Who knows? I guess we'll find out at some point. Who will we find out from? Politico reporter Scott Waldman. It's not either of my children. He's not related to me as far as I know. He's one of a million. As it turns out, it's a widespread surname, and we don't know anything about why that is, and no known familial connections. Not to Scott, not to Michael, not to Paul. Maybe they're all related. I don't know. But that's interesting. Nope, not this time. Scott Waldman. But you know what? This is not a new report. So maybe Scott Waldman has gone on to fame and fortune since then. I note that it is dated June 1st of this year. So I'm not sure how it got popped back into my timeline, but it must have. I guess this is a good indication that it is going to become live news again. Whoever put it in my social media timeline has a pretty good eye, I think, a pretty good eye for what I'm going to think is a pretty good eye for news later on. And then this will pop up in the campaign and you'll say, thanks to the Waldman duo, even though we're no kind of duo, for bringing this to my attention. Republican Governor Jim Justice was once identified as the only billionaire in West Virginia. And that's amazing to me because I think we have had at least one other on the radar, but wasn't he, like, at the time he was running for Senate? I mean, I think unless it was Jim Justice at the time, and I don't remember. But I think I guess 6 years ago, whoever was running for this slot was in the middle of building a gigantic mansion in Florida, and maybe just was like, oh, I lost the Senate. F it, I'm moving to Florida. I don't know. I have some vague recollection about that. Anyway, West Virginia, not rife with billionaires, I would think. But okay. Once identified as the only billionaire in West Virginia, but the business empire that he built on coal has shrunk to a small number of companies beset by lawsuits and struggling to pay their bills. A flurry of court filings in cases against Justice and his family indicates that his sprawling enterprises are short on cash, with his own lawyers calling them disorganized. Sounds Trumpy. The court documents show that Justice is facing a series of extraordinary actions for a sitting governor. You can do that to a sitting governor, not a sitting president, apparently, including the potential garnishment of part of his $150,000 state salary. Wow. To repay loans for coal equipment. The Charleston Gazette-Mail reported earlier this year. Another plaintiff has asked U.S. Marshals, not the Marshal of the Supreme Court, but U.S. Marshals to seize millions of dollars from his accounts. I mean, I'd like to seize millions of dollars from his accounts. Can we arrange that? The legal storm is colliding with Justice's campaign to unseat Democratic Senator Joe Manchin in next year's election and offers a test for the popular governor whose fossil fuel wealth defined his political rise in coal country, which really isn't coal country anymore. The latest legal challenge came Wednesday, and that was, but remember, this article is dated from early June of this year, but okay, some Wednesday in late May, apparently, when the Justice Department sued, this is very confusing. It's the Justice Department suing Jim Justice. So that's worse for radio commentators than the polls in Poland. But okay, the Justice Department sued Justice's business enterprise and his son, James C. Justice III, over $7.6 million in unpaid penalties and fees for federal mine and safety violations, as well as mine land reclamation costs. Our environmental laws serve to protect communities against adverse effects of industrial activities, including surface coal mining operations, Assistant Attorney General Todd Kim said in a statement. Through this suit, the Justice Department seeks to deliver accountability for defendants' repeated violations of the law and to recover the penalties they owe as a result of those violations. It's nice to see a more active Justice Department on this front under the Biden administration. I just remind you that Jeff Clark, who eventually found himself in position, thanks to Donald Trump, to possibly take over the entirety of the DOJ operations, used to be in the environmental law department. And I don't know, I guess throughout his tenure, for some reason, Jim Justice rose to be a billionaire. And now, when somebody else is in charge of actually enforcing environmental law, it seems he's bankrupt and having trouble paying his bills. How strange is that? Justice's campaign manager, Roman Stauffer, asserted that the lawsuit is politically motivated. Wow, that's weird. Joe Biden, Chuck Schumer, and the Democrats have seen the polls that show Jim Justice winning this race, and they're panicking, he said in a statement. So now the Biden Justice Department has decided to play politics or enforce the laws already on the books. Isn't that usually what these gun nut types say we should be doing? Anyway, the department did not respond to a request for comment. The laws, because they're doing their regular job. The lawsuit, which targets 13 Justice family coal companies, that it said regulators had ordered to stop mining activities more than 50 times. I think they've supposed to have gotten the point at this point. Adds another legal hazard to a long list of challenges facing Justice and his family business. In April, lawyers for his family business indicated in court documents that his empire is short on cash, just as the Trump empire is short on fingers. The case was brought by 5 Mile Energy Company, which is suing the Justice businesses, again, the family Justice, on behalf of New London Tobacco Market over a mining contract dispute. Got it? The case stretches back years and is still moving through the courts. And what do you do when you see that in West Virginia, Republican types are busy at each other's throats, suing one another in a coal company versus a tobacco company? I don't think that's really a tobacco company. New London Tobacco Market sounds like maybe a location or some landholders who are suing about mining rights on their land, but just, I don't know. So sort of curious about that. Although I Googled it and I got London Tobacco Market in London, Kentucky, which may or may not be on the border with West Virginia or something. I don't know. But anyway, but maybe they are actually tobacco growers. So what could be more West Virginian than fighting for control between coal and tobacco? It's very 20th century. But okay. I don't know. We'll just have to continue on with this story. Oh, I clicked on something, and so now I have lost my place in the story in going back. So, all right, we'll scroll down and look for the tobacco story. Here we are. Okay, so the dispute is over mining contracts. The case stretches back years and is still moving through the courts. As a defense in that case, justices, the governors, company lawyers, referred to his family businesses as a, quote, somewhat disorganized organization, which is weird, whose resources are stretched to the limit with respect to both finances and personnel. So he might also be a fake billionaire on top of it all. Justice's Republican and Democratic opponents have indicated they'll go after his personal financial challenges in the Senate campaign. By the way, didn't Jim Justice switch parties at some point? I mean, I think that was famously the case some years ago, not that many years ago either. And I mean, he made the right choice. The Republican Party is the place for fake billionaires, particularly if you're going to be a fake fossil fuel billionaire. You got to be in the Republican Party. So he made the switch, and none too soon. Let's see. Representative Alex Mooney, a conservative firebrand, running against Justice in the GOP primary. So he's not the nominee at this point. It's a little early for that. I don't know. I was forgetting that it was only 2023. But he tweeted last week, my rhino opponent, and I guess he's got a claim there, given that he's a party switcher. My rhino opponent, Jim Justice, will bankrupt America just like his businesses and the workers he wouldn't pay. It's about time that Republican on Republican violence got to this topic. Meanwhile, the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee sued Justice last week for Justice's schedules as governor. I guess we would like to see those things. Previously, schedules obtained by the Associated Press have indicated that Justice has spent little time at his office in the state capitol and devoted significant time to his private businesses. Justice's office, Maine comes into it because the word justice there, that's a force of habit. But Justice's office maintained to the AP that his calendars do not accurately reflect his activities, which is not really a great excuse, right? These records show that he doesn't spend any time here at the office. Yes, you should know as a matter of an official response that we don't keep records very well here and they're not accurate. That's a problem all by itself. Anyway, since entering the U.S. Senate primary, Jim Justice's financial scandals have come under increased scrutiny, DSCC spokesperson Amanda Sherman Beatty said last week. With court cases piling up, and remember, last week is in May, Alex Mooney is attacking Justice over his numerous debts and financial failures in Republicans' Battle Royal Senate primary. The National Republican Senatorial Committee, which has not endorsed a candidate in the West Virginia primary, shot back that Biden's administration has gone totally rogue. How so? Democrats weaponizing the federal government to attack the family of a Republican Senate candidate is a complete abuse of power. It would be if that were happening, I guess. NRSC spokesman Tate Mitchell said in a statement. And let's see. Next section of the article here comes under the heading of Decade of Economic Disaster. Justice largely made his fortune in coal. His state financial disclosures show that his family owns more than 100 businesses. I'm sure a bunch of little LLCs that he formed in order to, probably for tax avoidance purposes, but okay. They include dozens of coal-related businesses, as well as the 6,500-acre Greenbrier Luxury Resort in West Virginia. I know that place. Never been, but sounds nice. Except for the fact that he owns it. But the boom times for coal are fading, and Justice's company lawyers admit his empire is suffering as a result. You really need to move on from coal. The buying Greenbrier, I guess, was probably a better prospect for the future, diversifying, getting out of coal. Anyway, the family is exploring the sale of its primary coal-related business, Bluestone Resources, to settle more than $850 million in debt from personally backed loans. Yikes. The Wall Street Journal reported in March. Citizens Bank of West Virginia took legal action to reclaim $850,000, not $850 million, but $850,000 in debt, raising the possibility that a portion of Justice's salary as governor may be garnished. That would be embarrassing. The bank contends that Bluestone Resources defaulted on a loan used to purchase coal equipment. Justice has called that effort a political grandstand. Good old Citizens Bank, the huge democratic machine that it is. The local banking authorities. Okay. Or the local bankers, not the banking authorities. In a second case, Pennsylvania-based X-Coal, that's what it says, X-Coal Energy Resources. That may or may not have anything to do with Elon Musk. Asked a federal judge in West Virginia last month to have U.S. Marshals seize $1.8 million from Justice. Personally. That is to say, from him personally. Not necessarily that the Marshals personally be the ones that grab the money. But okay. In that case, a judge determined that Justice family companies did not deliver more than 70,000 tons of coal owed to X-Coal. Two of Justice's companies, Southern Coal Corporation and Bluestone Energy Sales Corporation, paid $5 million as part of a judgment in that case, but owe the remaining amount that X-Coal is trying to recover through the Marshals. In a third case, Carter Bank and Trust in West Virginia is trying to collect $300 million. These banks having this much to lend out to one person is pretty remarkable, too. So Carter Bank and Trust in West Virginia is trying to collect $300 million in debt from Justice's family businesses related to loans that were due in April. James Justice, the governor's son, accused the bank of predatory behavior in a statement and noted that the family companies had proposed a plan to repay $250 million immediately, followed by $57 million 4 months later. He said the bank rejected that plan because it didn't want to lose $20 million in annual interest payments from the loan. Well, it's tough luck working with banks, isn't it? It's hard. Maybe you should have stuck with the Democratic Party and abandoned the coal thing and fought with people against banks instead. Though there are plenty of people who don't think Democrats really do that. So, okay. Anyway, the Justice family will demonstrate that the bank's new court filing is nothing more than an illegal attempt to stop us from working with other lenders, James Justice said. Well, good luck. I haven't heard about that happening yet. It is unimaginable that a bank would deny a customer the ability to pay off a loan. Welcome to America, sir. In a fourth case, Kentucky-based 5 Mile Energy Company is seeking an $18 million judgment against Justice's companies as part of a years-long dispute over a mining contract, reported Metro News, an online and radio-based West Virginia news outlet. Lawyers for 5 Mile asked the judge for an expedited decision in the case, citing the possible sale of Justice's coal companies, as well as their ability to pay Carter Banks and Trust $250 million for the past due loans there. In court documents for the 5 Mile case, lawyers for the Justice companies portrayed the business as struggling to pay their bills. I mean, I think we're getting that point by now, but I like the finer points in all of this. We're going to need this later on when he's running for Senate, I guess, or when he's the nominee, assuming he becomes the nominee. I mean, billionaires rarely lose those bids, but okay. Some company accounts begin each month with just $1,000, the lawyers wrote. Then millions of dollars are transferred into them to cover expenses, followed by the account's balance plummeting to almost zero, court records show. It's cash flow for you. I mean, it's bad cash flow, but it does happen that way. The cash that comes in is almost immediately transferred from those entities that have it to those that need it, lawyers for the Justice family business said in court papers. Okay. The 100-plus companies listed on Justice's state financial statement vastly overstates, that's a lot of use of the word states, the numbers that are actually in business, family lawyers said in a recent court filing, and I don't know how good of an excuse that is either. Yes, we have hundreds of businesses, but very few of them are actually real businesses. We just transfer money in and out of them all the time. So as you can see, we're totally innocent, Your Honor. The lawyers argued in the 5 Mile case that barely a dozen of the 100-odd Justice coal and farming companies have continued to actively operate, that the companies are only beginning to emerge from a decade of economic disaster. Oh, I thought that was a decade of economic disaster for West Virginia. It's just personal, apparently. They also argue that operating cash is chronically scarce and transferred among companies on a just-in-time basis. It is apparent from the testimony that defendants are legitimately without assets to pay the default judgments entered against them. Good. So seize the mansions, seize the cars, seize the planes, seize the resort hotels. As if you needed more parallels between them and the Trumps. Anyway, it's unclear if Justice's financial woes will cost him any meaningful political support. A poll of registered voters released Tuesday, again back in May, shows that Justice is up 54 percentage points to Manchin's 32 points. In the Republican primary, Justice is leading Mooney 53-12. According to a poll from East Carolina University, Justice has survived political attacks citing his legal challenges for years. He's won 4 races, 2 primaries and 2 general elections against opponents who targeted his finances, noted Mark Blankenship, a Republican pollster in West Virginia who worked for Justice's 2020 gubernatorial campaign. But now Blankenship's name rings a bell, but isn't the other person who was at least once a billionaire in West Virginia also a Blankenship? Do West Virginians remember this? Do West Virginians listen to this broadcast? I don't know. Well, anyway, they spent millions of dollars airing ads over his court troubles, but Justice's popularity has only grown. Sort of inexplicable, but there you go. He's expanded his margins, Blankenship said, adding that a lot of voters in West Virginia are aware of similarly positioned lawsuits against President Trump, and his popularity is through the roof. So there may be an expectation that there that if you are successful at a certain level in business or whatnot, there may be a built-in expectation that there are lawsuits, he added. Okay, I mean, that's some kind of explanation for the lawsuits. What's not really being explained here is he doesn't have any money. Now, neither does Donald Trump, as it turns out. But, well, I don't know. Woe betide the Republicans once the people find out that very often these Republican entrepreneurial business types are, in fact, strapped for cash and straining all the resources of their many hundred-something companies. Also very interesting, of course, for him to be out there. I'm a successful businessman. I'm so successful, I've got 100-plus companies out there. But then when push comes to shove and they're in court, they tell the court, in reality, most of these companies are fake and they don't actually do anything but send and receive money and shuffle checks around on our desks from one fake company to the other, you see. So, if you're successful, most of your businesses are going to be fake. That's how it works out there. All right. Got to take a break. Got to scoop up the production staff's cell phone, which is loudly proclaiming incoming texts here, but is unattended. So we'll move that out of the way, and then maybe if I get a chance, I'll Google Blankenship and figure out why that name rings a bell so much. Maybe you already know because you're an informed listener of KITM, which will be right back after these semi-commercial messages.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. My goodness. All right, let's see. Where were we with all of this? Yes. Well, we left off with West Virginia. I did manage to Google that, and I got the cell phone out of here, too. So hopefully all of the super important messages via text that were bound for production staff have made it to the right place. The familiarity with the surname Blankenship comes from Don Blankenship. I don't know if there's any relationship there or not, and I'm not likely to find it in Wikipedia, but maybe. But who knows? There are large families there, and after all, we just read a story reported in Politico by Scott Waldman, and he's no relation to me, so you never know. But Don Blankenship ran for Senate in 2018, but didn't make it past the primary. Lost a three-way Republican primary to Patrick Morrissey, who then presumably went on to lose to what's the other guy that we don't like a whole lot from West Virginia? Oh, yeah. All right. Well, anyway, you know who we're talking about. And and Don Blankenship himself, notorious in the coal business, because how else do you become a billionaire or near billionaire in West Virginia? There are other ways to do it, I'm sure, but coal was, I guess, the fastest way to it. He was chairman and CEO of the Massey Energy Company, infamous for its explosion at the Upper Big Branch mine way back when, in 2010, I think. And by the way, along the way, in December of 2015, found guilty of one misdemeanor charge for conspiring to willfully violate mine safety and health standards in relation to that explosion, and sentenced to 1 year in prison. Did he actually serve it? I don't know. But the sentence was there, and that's interesting. And by the way, after losing the Republican primary, as so many of these fantastical egos do, And I guess as Trump may threaten in the future, if something were to go wrong or get in the way of his nomination by the Republican Party, he decided, if they won't nominate me, there must be something wrong with the party. I'm now switching. I'm changing over to the Constitution Party. But he attempted to run as a Constitution Party nominee for Senate, but guess what? Unable to get on the ballot, and later ended up endorsing Morrissey anyway. So there you have it. That's where the Blankenship name familiarity comes from. And if you already guessed that, and you tried to, if you tried to reach me via by social media, I'm sorry I missed it. But okay, I haven't had a chance to check up on those things, but I guess I'll take a peek now. Let's see. Anybody on Blue Sky guess that one? There's so many. It's very hard to keep all of these things open. There we are. Oh, there's a comment some minutes ago from Ricky the Canuckistani up in PEI asking us, isn't Greenbrier the place where they have the huge bunker that was meant to house Congress if there was a nuclear attack? Yes. Good ear for that one. And wow, that's a good trivia question memory for you. I think Greenbrier is in fact it, although there's another, no, I think the Homestead, that might be in Virginia. Is that the name of the place? I don't know, but I think the Greenbrier is in fact the place you're talking about. But there's another very fancy schmancy resort, to the west. Where is Homestead? Anyway, but I think Greenbrier is the one you're thinking about, and is quite correct. Let's see. The Homestead is in Hot Springs, Virginia. And I think, let's just Google this to make sure that you're right about this. I think so. Greenbrier Resort, and then we'll put bunker in there. And yeah, it comes up. There we go. And you can take a tour of the bunker. How do you like that? The declassified bunker at the Greenbrier is a must-see experience that takes you behind the scenes and walks you through a fascinating period in the, I don't know what, Cold War, I assume. Slow loading website here. But there you go. So now you can go and you can take a tour. Let's see, fascinating period in the resort's history, carved deep into the mountainside beneath our West Virginia wing. I guess a wing of the facility called the West Virginia wing. I mean, the whole thing's in West Virginia. Anyway, it's an emergency Cold War fallout shelter. Once a top secret U.S. government relocation facility for Congress, the bunker is now open to anyone interested in reliving a legendary piece of the Greenbrier history. Yeah, much like Congress itself, now open to just about anyone. And so Lauren Boebert is there. Jim Jordan wants to be speaker there. Murdery Trader Green, lessening force there every day. Paul Gosar, who else would you call out as, hell, they'll let anyone into Congress, just like they'll let anyone into the bunker. All right, definitely a good poll there. This is very, very KITM of you to pull that out of memory and to ask that question. All right, let's see. Anybody else trying to get through to me via the other one, Twitter? I don't think so. Okay. And no emails about it either. All right, so yes, listeners in Canada remembering trivia about West Virginia, but no as to listeners in West Virginia who wanted to chime in and tell me about who Blankenship was. Anybody know whether there's any relationship between Mark Blankenship the pollster and Don Blankenship the convict? No? All right, well, we'll find out. All right, let's see. What else have we got in store for you? Let's talk about the other billionaire guy who's in trouble. It's from a slightly different angle. We talked a little bit about the gag order, which might be coming. I'm very excited about that one. We'll see what happens. But another piece of the puzzle to share with you from themessenger.com. And I think we've dipped in on the Messenger before. Maybe Greg has brought us stuff from them. But anyway, let's see. Adam Klasfeld reports this a little more recently than the Jim Justice story from the 12th of this month. So what's that, Thursday? Ex-Trump Organization CFO Alan Weisselberg back in the news. In this case, his testimony abruptly ended after Forbes story accused him of perjury. That's in the stilted writing style of newspaper type headlines. But you get the point, even if there isn't all the connective tissue there. A source close to New York Attorney General Letitia James confirmed that her office is looking into the latest report about the former Trump CFO's testimony. So they're already in trouble, on trial, and then they make more trouble for themselves by testifying, let's say, less than optimally from the truth, justice, and the American way vantage point. The Trump Organization's former chief financial officer, Alan Weisselberg's testimony reached an abrupt and unexpected end on Thursday afternoon, just hours after Forbes magazine accused the convicted tax cheat of perjuring himself during an earlier stint as a witness. Weisselberg insisted on Tuesday that, from the witness stand, that he never focused on calculating the square footage of the former president's Trump Tower triplex, a 3-floor penthouse in his namesake skyscraper. 2 days later, on Thursday, this is just last week, Forbes reported that emails not currently in the Attorney General's possession show otherwise. Do we understand then what's happening here? He's on the stand on Tuesday in this trial, and they're asking about, okay, so what's the deal with Trump faking the valuation of his penthouse apartment, among many other properties that he owns? Oh, I don't know anything about that. I never focused on that. I don't know anything about what's going on. You don't ask me. I'm ignorant of the whole thing. And Forbes magazine at some point contacts, I guess, the Attorney General's office and says, you don't have these emails because you never, you subpoenaed lots of things, but you didn't know to subpoena everything in the world. It just so happens that we have some old emails, because you remember Forbes magazine is the one that is always putting out like the lists of the richest people in the world. I forget exactly what the parameters for this list was, like the top 40 richest American. Why 40? I don't know. Maybe I have it wrong, but basically they were they're famous for, just as like U.S. News and World Report is apparently famous for ranking colleges, right? They're like the definitive go-to list for whatever reason. Forbes is the richest people in the world, richest Americans, whatever. And so it was always super important to Donald Trump to be on that list so that it looked like he was super rich. That was very important to him for various reasons. And so every once in a while, I guess, in trying to evaluate, does he belong on that list? There were more up and coming people that clearly had considerably more resources than Donald Trump, even though Trump was vastly inflating his net worth, or his fake net worth, in order to remain on it. So I don't know how many other people campaign to be on the list. I assume actually at this point people do, besides Donald Trump. But I guess they must have been thinking about, he's on the bubble, or maybe we'll exclude him after all. And so Trump probably calls up and complains and says, talk to my guy, Alan Weisselberg. He'll tell you all about all the reasons why we're richer than you think and why we should be on the list. So they had to deal with Weisselberg at some point, who, would have had to have passed on claims about, inflated values. No, I never had anything to do with it. I never focused on that. I don't know. Apparently there's a whole record of him, harassing and campaigning against the staff at Forbes, trying to get his boss, or keep his boss on the list. And they said, we just heard him testify that he had nothing to do with this. We got a ton of emails that's nothing, that he's thinking about nothing else. How interesting is this? A source close to Letitia James confirmed that her office is looking into the latest Forbes report. Hours after the publication of that story, Manhattan Supreme Court Justice Arthur Engoron, the judge in the case, convened a sidebar with attorneys for the state and defense, but the subject of their private huddle remains unknown. Weisselberg was excused for the day shortly after that conversation, as attorneys for both sides reserved the right to call him back. On Tuesday, Weisselberg kept trying to distance himself from Trump's false computation of his triplex at 30,000 square feet instead of the 10,996 square feet that it actually is, repeatedly claiming never to have, the quote, never to have focused on the topic. Forbes senior editor Dan Alexander wrote that his old emails and reporter notes contradict those denials, pointing out in his story that Weisselberg absolutely thought about Trump's apartment and played a key role in trying to convince Forbes over the course of several years that it was worth more than it really was. Given the fact that these discussions continued for years and that Weisselberg took a very detailed approach in reviewing Trump's assets with Forbes, it defies all logic to think that he truly believes what he is now saying in court, Alexander added. Earlier this week, Trump attacked Alexander, of course he did, by name on Truth Social, labeling him a psycho and his news organization a rag. Forbes, after it dropped the former president from its world billionaires list for the second time in 3 years. Those Trump social media comments were also posted hours after James entered a series of Forbes fact-checking emails with Weisselberg and other executives into evidence. Alexander, whose byline appeared on the story knocking Trump off Forbes' billionaire list, was one of the staffers who sent those emails. So that's pretty interesting all by itself. And what a story. How do you like that? That's pretty amazing. And of course, it's really just of interest, even in the sense of Trump campaigning and putting his staff to work to try to convince Forbes to keep him on the list when it was, I guess it must have been at that point fairly obvious to the Forbes people. This guy just doesn't qualify for the list anymore. He just doesn't own what he says he owns, and the things that he does own aren't worth what he says they're worth. And yet, on trial, finally being brought to account for all of this, they're still lying along the way, as if there was no record anywhere of their other previous lies. So I find that pretty amazing. And I think a major development in the case, and one that I haven't seen discussed a great deal, but, I wasn't out there looking for it. Anyway, just thought you should be aware of it if you weren't already. Let's see, other things to bring to your attention. Let's see, turning back to the story in the House of Representatives, I saw a headline that looked like it might be of some interest. Steve Bannon writing this morning at the MSNBC Maddow blog, Jim Jordan and allies eye hardball tactics to get the speaker's gavel. Let's see what they have up their sleeve here. It's easy to see what's up Jim Jordan's sleeves because he doesn't wear a jacket and sometimes even rolls up his sleeves. That used to be a sign that there was nothing up your sleeves, but now it just means I tuck it higher up into my sleeves, probably. Can Jim Jordan become House Speaker by bullying his GOP critics into submission? I'm sure that's what wrestlers would think you should try to do. That's just sort of a wrestling mindset, I guess. The Ohio Republican and some of his notable allies intend to find out. Let's find out why we say this. Friday was not a normal day in the U.S. House of Representatives, besides the George Santos thing. It was a day in which House Republicans nominated House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jim Jordan for Speaker 2 days after he lost a similar intra-party race, though he received only 56% support from the GOP conference, despite running against a relatively obscure member who did not campaign for the position and who publicly conceded that he didn't actually want the job. I already forgot that guy's name, but Greg mentioned it earlier. But the situation being he was basically operating as a stand-in for the other than Jordan vote, and he netted 44% that way, or at least kept 44% out of Jordan's hands. Anyway, ordinarily, this would clear the way for a floor vote, at which point the majority conference would put the gavel in its nominee's hands, ordinarily. But Jordan and his allies were cognizant of the fact that he had plenty of Republican detractors, more than enough to block him from succeeding. To that end, the GOP conference held a second vote, what was referred to as a validation vote. They gave it a name, that's nice. Intended to gauge how many members were prepared to oppose Jordan's nomination on the floor. It was at that point, when Jordan learned that at least 55 members of his conference opposed his candidacy, he could afford to lose no more than 4 members if the right-wing Ohioan intended to prevail. And so, Instead of holding a floor vote, everyone simply went home. This was not, however, a weekend for quiet reflection. As the New York Times reported, Jordan and his allies have begun a right-wing pressure campaign against Republicans opposed to electing him Speaker, working to unleash the rage of the party's base voters against any lawmakers standing in the way of his election. And then there's a pull quote here from something. Let's see if we can figure out what. It is an extraordinary instance of Republican on Republican fighting that underscores the divisions that have wrought chaos inside the party, paralyzing the House of Representatives in the process. Several of Mr. Jordan's supporters have posted the phone numbers of mainstream GOP lawmakers, mainstream, that they count as holdouts, encouraging followers to flood the Capitol switchboard with calls demanding that they back Mr. Jordan or face the wrath of conservative voters as they gear up for primary season. The report added that Jordan's backers have identified the Republicans they see as standing in his way, and they're encouraging far-right voters to browbeat them into submission. The approach isn't especially surprising. Jordan has spent his political career relying on bullying tactics, though it is qualitatively different from the recent norm. When Kevin McCarthy was concerned about shoring up GOP support for his bid, he agreed to a series of secret side deals. When Steve Scalise struggled to lock down the votes he needed, he held private meetings with skeptics, asking what he could do to satisfy their concerns. Jordan, not the other jerk that I was thinking of. Jordan and his allies, meanwhile, are adopting far more aggressive tactics. Instead of making offers, I'm distracted by something I'm seeing on the, from the Temu auction site or whatever the hell it is where they sell these things. But they have very often very weird looking and inexplicable objects. And I was trying to, all right. Well, anyway, Jordan and his allies, meanwhile, are adopting far more aggressive tactics. Instead of making offers, and remember that when that was the excuse, well, why didn't Democrats come to us and make an offer to see what they could do either to keep McCarthy in office or boost Scalise into office instead? Like, as if that were a thing that the opposition party would be in a position to do or have any interest in doing. But they wanted deals to be cut, offers to be made. But Jordan is too tough and hard-nosed for that, and he wants to beat people up instead, I guess. So instead of making offers, they're relying on intimidation campaigns, because that's great for America, hoping that House Republicans who don't want to make the Ohioan speaker will ultimately be afraid not to, which is awesome, because at the same time, by the way, apparently it's causing an enormous scandal for Democrats to refer to Jim Jordan as an insurrectionist, or as being in league with the January 6th insurrectionists, even though, as Liz Cheney pointed out, no other member of the House from the Republican side had as much connection to and as much to do with the January 6th insurrection as Jim Jordan. And calling that fact out now scandalizes them. I think I saw over the weekend that there was a reporter gasping and grasping at pearls, clutching at pearls, over the notion that somebody would ever say this. Twice, in fact, a Democrat twice referred to him as an insurrectionist, because he is one. And I don't know, it's just, I guess, coincidental that they thought that their version of campaigning for speaker would not rely on making offers and deals in the civilian political context, but rather intimidation campaigns. Because, after all, that's what January 6th was, an intimidation campaign to try to get Congress, the Republicans in Congress, to make up some procedure by which they could reverse the results of the election. Weird that we would see in his bid for the speakership the exact same sort of tactics, intimidation rather than deal making. Because what's more easy to normalize in Washington than outright intimidation as opposed to deal making? Somehow we're managing to normalize it, and we're just stuck that way. Well, he takes his jacket off a lot, so of course he's going to intimidate people. What are you talking about? Anyway, let's see. And by the way, yeah, I love that ending line, they were hoping from these intimidation campaigns that House Republicans who don't want to make him speaker will ultimately be afraid not to. Just as they were hoping that Republicans could be intimidated into voting to acquit Trump in his second impeachment. They were afraid not to vote to acquit, or they were afraid in the House to vote to impeach him the second time. And many members were very clear about that fear. They feared for the safety of their family members at home. Anyway, what's more, Jordan has some high-profile GOP voices in his corner. We heard about one of these already. Not only is McCarthy backing the Judiciary Chairman, which is amazing, taking steps he was not willing to take on behalf of Scalise, but Jordan also has Donald Trump's support, and there's even some evidence to suggest, pretty good evidence, that Fox News' Sean Hannity has intervened to help Jordan, twisting lawmakers' arms. So that gives me a chance to just make the personal historical note. Some of you have heard this story on this very show before, but years ago, years before we actually began this show, and this show is kind of an outgrowth of this experience, actually, but back in, 2006, 2007, when I was writing for the front page over at Daily Kos and starting the Congress Matters blog, etc., and this has come up a lot in the context of, remember the discussion of how interesting it was with the C-SPAN coverage of the first couple days of the new Congress when they didn't have the speaker in place and therefore the rules weren't in place, et cetera, and they had all the special camera angles that were going on. And we discussed the connection between the rules and what C-SPAN is able to broadcast and who owns the camera feeds, and that they're really controlled by the House radio and television galleries, and that at some point I had proposed that Daily Kos tried to get admission to the House press galleries so that we could get direct access to that feed of the video from the floor, and we could produce our own C-SPAN with commentary, our own C-SPAN style coverage of what was going on. But first, we had to gain access to the press galleries in order to be entitled to take that feed directly from the board. There's other ways around it now, but anyway, that was the case at the time. But we made an application. Daily Kos applied for admission to the galleries, but we were rejected because we were too partisan. And we were too partisan because at the time, the big infraction that they were worried about was Daily Kos would write pieces in support of candidates for office and even put links to their Act Blue pages on their very front page. And so obviously we were too partisan to be permitted access to the galleries. Now, of course, it's evolved to the point where, even then I said, this is a ridiculous thing. I mean, Sean Hannity campaigns for Republicans outright, goes to their events, tours the country, barnstorms across the country in support of Republican candidates. Never any Democratic candidates. But Fox News is a member in good standing and probably even on the board of the press galleries. What's up with that? Now, of course, it's evolved to the point where they're actually having Fox News hosts arm twist members in a speaker's race, which is incredible. And no one will ever suggest that they be ejected from the press galleries. I mean, I've suggested it, but no one will ever listen to me about it. Anyway, and by the way, lots of people mistakenly thinking that the fact that there's no permanent speaker means that we get to go back to the awesome camera angles. We don't. Those are determined in the rules, and the rules are still in effect. So don't look for that anytime soon. So where were we in this article? Let's finish up. Will the arm twisting, will the intimidation campaign work? He's asking. For now, that's a good question without a good answer. There's been some reporting that Jordan's GOP skeptics have been irritated by the hard sell, but Republicans from competitive districts have been known to fold under pressure before. Greg was noting this, right? And it's an open question as to how many of the 55 members who opposed Jordan on Friday in a secret ballot election, in which no one would know how they voted, would do so again in a recorded floor vote. For now, the plan is to hold that vote on Tuesday, tomorrow. And according to a Politico report, anti-Jordan members from within the House Republican Conference are vowing to support a GOP rival to the party's nominee. While they have not yet nailed down a specific name, the article added, they believe the person they ultimately land on will not only be able to block Jordan from the speakership, but also give cover to those who want to vote against him. So watch this space, Steve says. And there's a postscript to all this. It's a far-fetched scenario, he says, but there's been some chatter in recent days about the partisan risks associated with a floor vote. If one member gets a majority, he or she becomes speaker. If no one gets a majority, the race will go to a second ballot. But some have speculated that if Democratic turnout for the floor vote is 100%, it means House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries will get 212 votes. If there is a significant number of GOP absences, it would lower the threshold for what constitutes a majority, and at least theoretically, Jeffries could become Speaker by accident. Now, I don't really think this will happen. I think that's a correct assessment of it, that it could work, but I don't think this will happen, Steve says. And even if it did, the Republicans would soon oust him afterwards by way of a motion to vacate the chair. But it's one more complication to keep in mind as the process moves forward. This is a good observation. Good to be armed with that fact. And yes, if they're actually absent for the vote, then what they're looking for is a majority of those present and voting. So yeah, I guess Hakeem Jeffries could become Speaker by accident. It rarely happens. I mean, it never happens because, of course, usually the speakership is voted on the first day, and that's the day they've all shown up to be sworn into office. So absenteeism is at its lowest then. It's a very important day. But, yeah, I guess so. But, yeah, he backs it up pretty well, too, by saying, well, even if that accident happens, they'll just move to vacate the chair very quickly afterwards. So, yes, that's true. And by the way, keep in mind, if they have to do multiple ballots, they can at some point get together and decide that they will elect someone to the speakership by plurality instead, if the vote is split three ways. But there's a definitive difference between a Republican candidate, like if a Republican manages to get 213 votes, not even that significant, and 212 for Jeffries, and then various holdouts out there for someone else, they may just decide, well, as a matter of fact, we'll rule that we'll elect by plurality, and if you don't like it, you can make a point of order against it, then we'll put together a majority of votes to tell you to get lost. And see if that works. It'll work. They can do it. Yeah. All right. We'll be back tomorrow to talk about it some more.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
But you don't have to wait until tomorrow to continue your news and entertainment for the day. Of course, the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy comes up next with Justice Putnam. He's got a collection of stories for you to share, including what's this up at the top. The U.S. is working through third countries for the release of hostages held by Hamas. So find out some more of the details about that and others from around the world next.